During enslavement, African Americans typically received their religious experiences from churches set up by their white masters.
But when it came time for them to set up their own churches, the Baptist faith owes credit to the edifice and community that's still going strong in Augusta, Georgia.
Springfield Baptist Church, which started as Silver Bluff Church on a plantation in South Carolina, holds the title as the oldest African American Baptist church in the United States.
I'm going to work until my day is done. Oh, yes, I will.
We're the oldest Black Baptist church in America, still standing in its original location.
Standing tall on the corner of 12th and Reynolds Streets in Augusta, Springfield Baptist Church holds a distinct honor, but it started under a different name before the American Revolution on the other side of the Savannah River in South Carolina. CSRA author and historian Wayne O'Brien gives us a peek into the past.
It was established on the Galpin Plantation. There would be traveling preachers that would go through Silver Bluff Plantation, and some of the other local plantation owners did not want traveling preachers to come through.
But Ireland native George Galpin, who worked as an Indian trader at Silver Bluff, gave his slaves the green light to worship on the plantation.
Well, George Galpin would have been considered a good master.
By 1773, the enslaved people on the Galpin plantation and traveling ministers Reverend Wade Palmer, a white man, and former slave and African-American pastor George Lyle formed the non-denominational Silver Bluff Church. Among that group were slaves David George and Jesse Galpin Peters. Both were trained as pastors and ready to serve a flock that more than likely included the ancestors of Jerome Gaines.
When I start looking at names, luckily a lot of people in my family lived to 80, lived to 90, so I was able to connect their names to slave registers, estate records, and connect them to the George Galpin plantation. And I am actually a descendant of George Galpin and one of the women who he had children with.
Gaines says Galpin and his slaves were spread across many acres at Silver Bluff, now maintained by the National Audubon Society. The church stood in the area where Silver Bluff Baptist now stands. But 2 years after its formation, the war started.
During the Revolution, the British take over and they scattered the church. So when they take over, David George and about 90 or so of Galpin's former slaves, now they're kind of liberated. They traveled to Savannah and started the first African church in Savannah.
A few years after the war ended and it was safe to return to the Savannah River area, history continued.
Jesse Peters ends up in Springfield, and he establishes Springfield Baptist Church.
In 1787, the church Peters helped launch at Silver Bluff was revived at the 12th Street location in a brush harbor. That's where he found a mostly free black town near Augusta called Springfield Village.
Boating, carpentry, wagoners, barbers, seamstress, blacksmiths, weavers, launderers, housekeepers, and of course rivermen.
All black?
All black.
So it was an all-black town?
All black town. Augusta annexed Springfield Village in 1798 and annexed them into part of the city.
Deacon Walter Wright tells us Springfield Baptist Church grew to more than 1,000 members in the early 1800s. The church's 200-year history book notes that overflow led to a few daughter churches starting in Augusta. Sharon Baptist organized in 1821 and Thankful Baptist in 1840. Later, Central and Union Baptist churches were started, and help even came for Trinity CME, Bethel AME, and Mount Calvary Baptist churches.
We had to go to Sunday school every Sunday. And we had a deacon that lived across from us, Deacon Searles. And he used to pick us up, and Grandma would say, I don't ever want him to be waiting for you.
Born in 1942, Isaac Johnson recalls attending Sunday school, which started at the church in 1859 as the first of its kind for African Americans. And the education building, still standing today, is the first brick and mortar facility secured by Springfield in 1844.
The old building was purchased from St. John. That was St. John's first church building. And they moved that church building down Green Street, down up Reynolds Street, to put it on that spot.
And it was one of many firsts started by older congregations.
In 1866, the Equal Rights Association was formed here at Springfield, which the following year became the Georgia Republican Party.
While the Grand Old Party established itself, a staple in the historic black college community formed right at Springfield Church.
Morehouse College was founded at Springfield, in the basement.
Originally the Augusta Baptist Institute in 1867 and later Morehouse College in 1879. Springfield minister William Jefferson White started the school under Reverend Henry Watts' tutelage. And from that first building where education flowed, the church grew, constructing the brick edifice now seen in 1897. Nearby, Springfield Village Park commemorates the walk through time.
And the Tower of Aspiration was designed. And that's to show the growth of the church. That's what it's called, the Tower of Aspiration. And he said, and then we can run the history of it, and then we'll build the 3 water things to represent the river.
That growth benefited Augusta as Springfield was home to many great families, including a host of local teachers. Today, the congregation is small but mighty, with 250 members, pastored by Reverend Hardy Bennings III.
We still feed the hungry. Although we're in the pandemic, we still have activities for our children.
We're great people. We have a history before slavery, but during slavery we still had that ingenuity. We still created things.
When you look at African American history, we're talking about the birth of the United States of America. And you have these black Baptist churches that are predating that and also forming as a result of the birth of the country. You have the birth of these churches.
After the break, Dee will introduce you to a man who is making his mark on the CSRA one brick at a time.